Good morning and welcome to God Day. My name is Kurt, and today I want to talk about a fact. And the fact is that God is the God of new beginnings. God is the God of green shoots. God is the God of new growth. When everything is burnt, no matter how burnt it is, no matter how black with ash it is, new shoots, green shoots will always come out. I remember years ago when Melanie and I were pastoring a church in San Diego. My father has a ranch, a vineyard in San Diego. It's just beautiful countryside. But we had what we called the Great Fire, the Great Fire in San Diego. And it burnt down a huge portion of San Diego County. And even though we were living in like the city area, we would wake up every morning and just the amount of soot, the amount of dust, the amount of smoke of particles that were on our car, we just had to scrape it off. It was like it just snowed, ash, all the ash that was absolutely everywhere. So we were just living in this continual state of like ash, darkness, fogginess for weeks on end. And my father had his ranch was in the fire line where the majority of the fire happened. And nobody told him about it. He just happened to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And my dad never wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning. So he woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and he just felt something, or someone told him, he's not a believer, but somebody told him just to go outside and take a look. So he looked and he saw on the hillside this distant wall of fire racing towards his house, which was all made of redwood, by the way. So quickly he woke up his wife, he took some valuable possessions, got in his four-wheel drive, and just hightailed it down the dirt road, got out of there, got a table at a local Denny's, the American Denny's, the diners that we have. And he just, because they were open 24 hours a day, I guess, and they just waited it out there. And he said to me later, he said, Kurt, I thought that every structure on my property was gone. I thought the farmhouse was gone. And I think there was 2 other houses on the property that they were gone. And the main family house, which is a very famous architect designed it, beautiful house. It's made of redwood, which is, you don't get redwood houses these days anymore. And of course, he assumed it was all burnt. So he went back to the ranch, and of course, everything was burnt except the family house. And it was quite amazing because Melanie and I, we prayed for the family house. We prayed that it wouldn't burn because it had all of our valuable possessions, all the family heirlooms, everything that was valuable to us was in that family house. And Melanie and I went up there, and literally, the fire line stopped 1 meter before a wooden house. That house is so flammable. If one spark got onto it, it would have burnt down the entire house. But the amazing thing is when Melanie and I were there, we saw that everything was black, black, black with ash. There was no green anywhere. It was just absolutely like deforestation, destruction, doom and gloom. There was nothing really redeeming to see. But then a couple weeks later, or maybe a month later, I can't remember, we went up again and we walked around the property and we saw all these green shoots coming out of the stumps, coming out of the trees, coming out of the blackness. And I think Melanie took pictures. And it was such a beautiful contrast that, look, 95% of it or 98% of the ranch was still black. But to see these green shoots just coming through the ash was so absolutely beautiful. And 2 years later, when I went back to his ranch, it was more beautiful than ever before. So this is what I want to talk about today, that God is a God of green shoots. If we think that our life is wasted, that we're burnt out, that precious things to us, and I'm not denying, that there are some valuable things that we lost on that ranch, but it gave us so much hope that no matter how devastating the destruction was, that there was hope, because Melanie and I saw just hundreds and hundreds, or if not thousands, of green shoots just coming out out of the ground. So if that is your life, if you feel that you've had a fire, symbolically, metaphorically speaking, in your life, and that many things you've held dear that have been burnt, lost to a fire, I want to say today that God is the God of green shoots. Now, when I was preparing for this message, I love National Geographic magazines. I used to collect them, and if you go to somebody's house in the States, at least in my generation, you'll see like a whole collection of National Geographics, and I grew up with them. I absolutely love them. So I was reading an article in National Geographic about the benefits of forest fires, and I said to myself, hold on, green shoots, forest fires, what are the benefits of forest fires? When I saw the destruction of that fire at my dad's ranch and losing so many structures and valuable things and trees, I didn't see any benefits there. But when I saw the ranch 2 years later, I did see some benefits. I did see the fact that the ranch was even more beautiful than before. So what are the benefits of forest fires? And today, I want to show you that the benefits of the forest fires are kind of like our spiritual benefits when we've experienced a fire or a devastation in our own lives. And number one, forest fires remove layers of decay, dead organic matter, releasing valuable nutrients in the soil. Now, I remember my dad's ranch before the fire. And there was so much layers of decay, inorganic material. It was kind of like a mattress. You could take a walk and there were so many piles of leaves and inorganic material. Nobody had ever raked it out before. So what was happening is the nutrients in the soil had never been released, because perhaps the topsoil was so hard and it had this layer on it, so nothing could get into it and nothing could be released out of it because there was no sunlight, nothing. So this forest fire, it swept through so quickly, but it burnt up all of those layers of, I would say, like old growth, those layers of decay were completely burnt out. And what happened, because you could see the green shoots, it was releasing these incredible nutrients that had been stuck in the soil for years, and only fire could release those valuable nutrients. And number two, forest fires open the forest canopy to sunlight, which stimulates new growth. I remember my dad had quite a few forests on his property. And I'd walk through the forest and you would see all these vines and all these entanglements, and the sun couldn't get through, okay? So if the sun can't get through, the sun can't stimulate growth. So when this forest fire happened on his property, what happened is the fire came through the trees and just burnt up all of the dead branches, etc., that did not give sunlight to the trees. And I remember, well, even in our place in Spain, I should, but because of the lockdown, we cannot visit our place in northern Granada because we're not allowed to cross the border. But I'm just pining to go up there and do some pruning. And I know I have to clear out some vines and just some rubbish, some inorganic material, so that certain plants can get sunlight. Because if these plants don't get sunlight, they cannot grow. So the benefit of the fire is it clears out that canopy, of inorganic material that's blocking the sunlight. Number three, forest fires make new growth and life possible, okay? I heard, for example, seeds from certain species of pine trees, okay? There's not like one species of pine trees, but probably hundreds, and there's certain species of pine trees that have pine cones, and I've seen them as a boy, and they're covered in pitch, like this sticky, resinous material. And many times as a kid, I tried to pick one up, to throw it at somebody or play around, whatever, and I couldn't throw it because it just stuck to my hand. And the only way in this certain species of pine cone that those seeds can be released, fire. You got it. So the benefits of fire when it came into my dad's ranch, and he had a certain species of pine tree, and it released the seeds so they could grow, that was a benefit because it made new life possible. And I was also reading in National Geographic, and I don't know what they are, but in Australia they have what's called a wild lupin. It's a type of a plant that caterpillars eat. And if there's not fire, sometimes the wild lupins go too tall for the caterpillars to eat them because it's a very nutritious food for the caterpillars, okay? And so fire makes it possible for the seeds to fall, and then as they grow up, the caterpillar can eat them. Now, if the caterpillar does not eat them, the caterpillar can't turn into a beautiful butterfly. So there is a benefit, although I do not minimize the destruction of fires. I don't do that. You know, you can't say to somebody, oh, you've lost a loved one, you've had a fire in your life. You can't replace people. But God is the God of green shoots, and there will always be green shoots coming out of there. So if there's not a fire, many times new life is not possible. Now, I love this verse in Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 to 3. And there's different versions of this, but this is beautiful. It says, a green shoot will sprout from Jesse's stump. From his roots, a budding branch. Okay, a messianic title. The life-giving Spirit of God will hover over him. The Spirit that brings wisdom and understanding. The Spirit that gives direction and builds strength. The Spirit that instills knowledge and fear of God will all be his joy and his delight. Now, Isaiah spoke this in a time when his land, for lack of a better word, was deforested, was burnt down. The Assyrians came in, pillaged, raped, dragged off people with hooks, enslaved people, tortured people, burnt literally all of their food sources to the ground. And then Isaiah sees something different. He's seeing the burnt outness, the devastation of this fire that the Syrians brought in. And he's saying, you know, one day there's going to be a green shoot that's going to sprout from Jesse's stump. And you might say, well, Isaiah, hold on. Jesse, the father of David, he's been dead for 400 or 500 years. But then he says, no, there's going to be a green shoot, even though there's a stump, it's been cut down, even though there looks like there's no hope, one day a green shoot is going to grow out of that, become a branch, and that's the messianic title of Jesus. So perhaps I just invented this word, you know, talking about the green shoot growing out of the stump, and I call this word stumpish. You know, are you feeling stumpish today? I tell you, I've suffered loss in my life. I've been through a lot of things. I'm 60 years old, so I've seen a lot of life. And so often I felt like I'm just a stump in the middle of a burnt out forest, that there's no hope. And I feel stumpish. So that's my new word. You know, perhaps you feel stumpish, okay? You're in good company because God wants to do a new work in you. God wants to begin a new work in you. It's like Jeremiah. He was feeling stumpish in the book of Lamentations, and he was surveying Jerusalem. Everything was burnt down. Even the temple was dismantled. There weren't even any stones to the temple. They were just all over the place. There was no temple. And he's just saying, God, what's happened here? And he was bemoaning his fate, and he was accusing God. And then suddenly the Spirit wells up in him, and he says, you know what? God, your mercies are new every morning. You're like renewable life, renewable energy source. No matter how bad it is, no matter how ruined our lives are, there's always that potential for a seed, for the green shoot to sprout up. So if you're feeling stumpish, I want to tell you that God is the God of green shoots. So really, I just wrote some things down here, and I said that each of us has seeds in us waiting to spring to life, okay? Like if I go up to my place in Granada right now, I know that there's seeds. I know it. That's why I want to get up there and water them so I can look forward to the spring growth. But I can't get up there because of the coronavirus. But there are seeds waiting to spring to life. But they're also in every one of us. So each of us has seeds in us waiting to spring to life into green shoots. But perhaps we are in need of God's fire in our lives to bring out the best of us. God is an all-consuming fire, okay? Many of us, including myself, when I hear the word fire, I get pretty scared. You know, if God says, I'm going to test you with fire, I'm saying, whoa, man, I can barely hold my hand in the fire for 2 minutes. You know, I'm scared of fire. But usually when it talks about God as a consuming fire, he's not a consuming, destructive fire for the people that he loves, but he's a refiner's fire. Okay, it's a refiner's fire. We go in rough and we come out as gold. We come out as diamonds. Yes, it is scary. Yes, it is very, very uncomfortable. Yes, it was terrible for my dad's ranch to burn around, and the loss was indescribable. But 2 years later, it was back better than ever before. So God is in that restoration business, and he tends to restore things even better than they were before, but we have to trust him for that growth. So, you know, perhaps we need that fire of God in our lives to burn away everything that's hindering us, bogging us down, getting rid of the undergrowth, getting rid of the hardness of the topsoil so those seeds, so the nutrients can come out. And we need nutrients in our life, because if we're feeling stumpish, we need nutrients. We need fertilizer or fruitilizer, we could call it. So perhaps we have lived too long in the shade of our old ways and have not grown because lack of light. Look at our lives. What are the dark areas of my life? What are the dark areas of your life? What are the areas that I'm ashamed of? What are the areas that you are ashamed of? Yes, it's going to be painful for God's light to come and expose our darkness, and for other people to see our darkness. It's going to be maybe humiliating, embarrassing, but once we allow that light to come in, wow, that light stimulates new growth. That turns us into more than a conqueror. Perhaps we have beautiful seeds in us, full of potential, contained in our pine cones, our sticky pine cones, and they need to be burnt, you know, in order for that to take place. You know, fire, what I would like to say is, if we don't have fire, how in those pine cones, but to pretend that our lives are like a sticky pine cone, okay? And the seeds are contained in that sticky pine cone. And the only way to release those seeds is by fire, okay? Fire will be responsible for the new growth. So really, when Jesus says, unless a seed falls to the ground, there will be no new life. It has to fall to the ground. It has to die. It has to perish. It has to give its life up and fall to the ground, which is scary for the little seed. But then the seed takes root, it germinates, a green shoot comes out, and then before you know it, it's a beautiful apple tree or a beautiful tree. But the process of dying, taking up your cross, of falling to the ground. So I have to ask myself, what in me needs to be burnt? What in me needs to fall to the ground? And wow, I remember the first time that I ever preached. It was in South Africa. I went to a Baptist church, and the deacons came out and they said, young man, what will you be preaching on? And I said, well, gentlemen or sirs, whatever I said, I felt terrible. I couldn't even tie a tie, so I had like a clip-on tie, and I just felt terrible and intimidated, and I knew I was in that process of dying. And I said, well, I'm preaching on the woman on the well. And they said to me, we've heard that 3 Sundays in a row. And I got up there and I started talking, and I lost complete confidence. And there and then I made a decision. I'm never going to speak publicly again. I'm never going to preach. I'm just getting out of here and just finding another profession, something else to do. Then I realized that my seed has to fall to the ground. I was humiliated. I felt embarrassed. I did a terrible job, a terrible job. And I remember I was speaking and I was just sweating. And then I reached in to get my handkerchief, and my handkerchief wasn't there. And these big globs of sweat were on my glasses, and I couldn't see. I couldn't even read the Bible that well. I was stumbling everywhere. And the worst part is I saw my wife in the front row, and she's busy like praying away for me, and that made me nervous. But that process of dying to myself, dying to my shyness, my pride, letting myself fall to the ground, if I didn't continue dying, and I preached another message, it was bad. Another one, it was bad. Another one, it was okay. But that process of dying to myself was hard. And then I tried Christian TV in South Africa. My wife had a program, and all I had to do was to read a book report. I couldn't even do that. I humiliated myself. I got out. I said, I'll never be on television again. And then fast forward years later, here in Spain, and Howard Condor was playing the drums in our church, and him and Gordon were always asking me, Kurt, we want you on TV. And I said, nope, I'm not going to be on TV, because I had this bad experience. You see, I wasn't letting my seed fall to the ground. And then I get onto Revelation TV, and I remember my first time on Revelation TV, Howard assured me, he said, Kurt, we're going to be interviewing a terrorism expert for Washington, D.C. via Skype, and don't worry, I'm going to be with you for the interview. And, I get there, and of course he's not there. Of course I have to do it all by myself. And I feared that I would mess up, that the past would revisit me, that forest fire that happened permanently burnt me, and that I couldn't recover, and that there would be no green shoots. But then something mysterious happened. I did the interview, and I absolutely loved it. I felt like I was at home. And that green shoot grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And 9 years later, here I am on Revelation TV, and I love it because I love people. I love just sharing my life with you. I love to see the fact that, encourage you that you all have seeds. It's like Jesus is the master gardener, and yes, he will prune branches. I remember my wife, when we lived in San Diego, we planted 2 vines, grapevines. And about a year later, Melanie had to prune them. And so she pruned one, and she gave it such a haircut. It's like she pruned it so much that I said to her, you've killed the vine. I got like a little irritated with her. You've killed it. And then I said, have mercy on the other one, and just don't cut it. Don't prune it that much. So she just did that. And months later, guess which vine was the most prosperous, beautiful, tall, healthy vine? It was the one that was cut the most. So I want to say to you, don't fear the fire of God. God is an all-consuming fire. He's a holy fire, but he just burns out all of that stuff that's holding us back from becoming beautiful, from growing, from carrying out the dreams that God has put into you and me. Just like the television, just like I never dreamed that I could be a pastor of a church. I was so shy, but I had to let that shyness fall to the ground, become vulnerable, and let God grow it. And boy, did he grow it for me. So unless a seed is burnt, unless a seed falls to the ground, it can't produce a crop. I was thinking the other day, if I had one seed, say an apple seed, okay, and say there were no apple trees on the face of the earth, and I had 50 years to populate the whole world with apple trees, all I would need is one seed. I would plant that one seed, let it fall to the ground. It would produce another apple tree with thousands and thousands of seeds within the apples on that apple tree. I would plant them in different countries of the world, and in 50 years' time, literally, I would have been responsible or facilitating, millions and millions or actually hundreds of millions of apple trees throughout the world. So when we feel burnt out, when we feel that we're incapable of going forward, I think it's the best time to allow those green shoots to develop and grow in our lives. And Father God, we thank you for this time. I just want to thank you for the fire, the godly fire that's been in my life so many times. And I hated it, I screamed, I cried, I resisted it. I saw no point in it. I saw no redemptive quality in it whatsoever. But yet, that fire in my life was necessary, painfully necessary. And yes, I did feel very stumpish, but you caused a green shoot to grow out of that barren stump. And Lord Jesus, I pray for all of my dear brothers and sisters today, Lord, that the fire, the refiner's fire, would come in a gentle, in a wonderful way, Lord, and it would bring out the best in all of us. That even no matter how old we are, no matter where we are in life, that we would experience new growth, new energy, new life, and new shoots in our life. Thank you. And it's really been great to be with you, and I will see you on another occasion. And thanks so much for listening to this God Day, and I pray that major restoration and growth would happen in all of our lives. God bless you. Love you guys. Goodbye.